So I haven't heard the excuse from liberals about why it was good that Joe Biden went to Ukraine on a surprise visit and gave them half a billion dollars while ignoring the residents of East Palestine. They want to talk about how they want universal health care, they want benefits and social programs for the American people. But then when Joe Biden is basically provoking World War III with Russia, they just defend that and act like the East Palestine thing isn't happening. I mean, let's just put it this way. Where's Greta Thunberg? I mean, I know she's not American, but where are the leftists to be outraged and demand immediate action? Now, I know, don't get me wrong. I know out there are many leftists who are saying, look, I'm posting all day about it. That I get. Where's Joe Biden? Where's the pressure campaign from the high-profile personalities? Why are liberal personalities completely ignoring the scandal? Yeah. Well, the big news is Joe Biden is prioritizing Ukraine over his own country. Russia has suspended the only remaining major nuclear treaty with the U.S. So, yeah, I guess nuclear war. Zelensky's warning of of World War III if China allies with Russia. China's apparently converting old fighter jets into kamikaze drones. And, well, Russia's already warned in the past about nuclear war. So, I don't know, man. I got to be honest. It's tiring. It is. As more and more of this stuff happens, I just got to say, I see my priorities shifting from commenting on news stories and cultural issues and being more concerned with whether or not we are going to have enough food and clean water if these things persist. Russia is not satisfied with what's going on, obviously, but they're not facing some foreign excursion overseas in a faraway land. They're on their own border, which makes this much more personal for the people of Russia and for Vladimir Putin. And that's something the U.S. probably does not care to understand or ultimately doesn't care about. I have to wonder, when we talk about depopulation agendas and global elites, if they're just sitting back being like, meh, World War would be good. You've got these billionaires building bunkers in Montana and New Zealand. You think they really care about about nuclear war or apocalypse? I mean, many of these people think there's too many humans on this planet as it is. So I have to wonder about their motivations. Right now, we are inching ever closer to outright nuclear war, World War III. And there's a lot of people with the optimism bias or the normalcy bias who say it can't happen, it won't happen. The it won't happen people, I think, I don't know. Look, it can't happen is, I think, sticking your head in the sand. The it won't happen people are not paying attention to the escalation that we're seeing. Now, I don't know that it will happen. It's possible it won't. I don't think anybody can predict it, but I will just add, and the point of this segment, to wake up in the morning and see the big story being that Russia is suspending the last nuclear treaty. The doors are being opened. The gates are being opened. Okay. If you're concerned about, let's say there's rioters outside, out rampaging through the streets, and you're inside your gated community, and they say, inside, like, hey, man, I'm really worried those rioters can come here. And then you've got someone saying, no, it can never happen here. They're rioting somewhere else. And then you hear one day that the rioters are getting closer. And then they decide, we're going to open the gates. Just open the gates. And you're like, now hold on there a minute. We're not quite at the point where the rioters have rushed in and started smashing up our homes. But why open the gates to this? Why not stop, disassociate ourselves and say, stop participating? The point is, this right here is Russia opening the gates. They are at the gates. They are saying they are preparing for nuclear war. First, you had state propagandists say, if we lose in Ukraine, nuclear war, World War III. And Joe Biden was like, come on, man, who cares about East Palestine? I'm going to go to give $500 million to Ukraine again, $100 billion on top. And Russia says, okay, we see your play and we will prepare. As much as these liberals are coming out being like, we're winning in Ukraine and Slava Ukrainia and all that stuff. It's like, yeah. And every time you do that, Vladimir Putin's finger moves closer to the button. They don't care. They just don't. You think Western powers are going to nuke Russia? See, here's the thing y'all need to realize. I shouldn't even say that. I think most of you probably already get this. One guy is surrounded by 50 guys. Now, those 50 guys can all start shooting at the one guy, and the one guy can all start shooting back. And the point is, Russia, as a single entity in a large landmass, can cause, with their nuclear arsenal, massive destruction to the United States and to Europe. Destruction that will not be comparable to what would happen to Russia. Now, they may, the NATO and the U.S., they may wipe Russia off the planet, off the map. But Russia will do the same in kind. And Russia, I think, is a country of only, like 100 million people, maybe less. They can damage the nations to 1 billion people. The point is, it is not equal. Russia can cause maximum collateral damage. Is it worth it? For what? Ukraine, energy, man, it's not. The United States should be minding its own business, but it won't and it never will, because there are powerful international interests who want a liberal world order or some kind of new version of a world order. And that means letting everything get destroyed in the process. I should read the news. Here's the story from The Hill. Russian President Vladimir Putin declared Tuesday that Moscow was suspending its participation in the New START treaty, the last remaining nuclear arms control pact with the U.S., sharply upping the ante amid tensions with Washington over Ukraine. Speaking in his State of the Nation address, Putin also said that Russia should stand ready to resume nuclear weapons tests if the U.S. does so. And we have. A move that would end a global ban on nuclear weapons tests in place since the Cold War times. Well, okay, we've done ICBM tests like the Minuteman III, I think. Explaining his decision to suspend Russia's obligations under the New START, Putin accused the U.S. and its NATO allies of openly declaring the goal of Russia's defeat in Ukraine. They want to inflict a strategic defeat on us and try to get to our nuclear facilities at the same time. He said, declaring his decision to suspend Russia's participation in the treaty, in this context, I have to declare today that Russia is suspending its participation in the Treaty on Strategic Offensive Arms. New START's official name is the Treaty between the United States of America and the Russian Federation on measures for the further reduction and limitation of strategic offensive arms. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg voiced regret about Putin's move, saying, with today's decision on New START, full arms control architecture has been dismantled. I strongly encourage Russia to reconsider its decision and respect existing agreements. Now, what's the purpose of this? It's saber rattling. This is Vladimir Putin stating to you, to I, to the world, they are preparing the use of nuclear weapons, because the reality is, if Putin truly felt like the end was nigh, he would just use them. Treaties be damned. But he's giving you fair warning. And he's hoping that the U.S. backs off. You don't need to get rid of any treaties. You can just be like, fire the missiles. But we have a treaty, sir. Who cares? Treaty is an internal law. It's international agreement that, what? We're at war already. Why abide by a treaty? Think about it this way. You make an agreement with your neighbor. Hey, we're not going to, have guns in our homes. We don't want to use them against each other. And then one day your neighbor is flinging horse crap onto your lawn and damaging your property. You're going to be like, we have no agreements. Any agreement about not escalating the fighting is pointless because the dude's flinging horse manure at me. The U.S. is actively at war with Russia in Ukraine. So Russia's probably thinking, there's no agreement with these people because they shouldn't be here in the first place. They shouldn't be at our doorstep involved in our border dispute. So why would I bother having any kind of agreement with them? Their word is worthless. So it's a warning. That's what they're getting ready for. Putin argued that while the U.S. has pushed for the resumption of inspections of Russian nuclear facilities under the treaty, NATO allies had helped Ukraine mount drone attacks on Russian air bases hosting nuclear-capable strategic bombers. The Russian military said that it shot down the Soviet-built drones that struck 2 bomber bases deep inside Russia in December, but acknowledged that several servicemen were killed by debris that also damaged some aircraft. Putin on Tuesday mocked NATO's statement urging Russia to allow the resumption of U.S. inspections of Russian nuclear weapon sites as some kind of theater of the absurd. The drones used for it were equipped and modernized with NATO's expert assistance, Putin said, and now they want to inspect our defense facilities? In the conditions of today's confrontation, it sounds like sheer nonsense. He said that a week ago, he signed an order to deploy new land-based strategic missiles and asked, are they also going to poke their noses there? The Russian leader also noted that NATO's statement on New START raises the issue of the nuclear weapons of Britain and France that are part of the alliance's nuclear capability, but aren't included in the U.S.-Russian pact. They are also aimed against us. They are aimed against Russia, he said. Before we return to discussing the treaty, we need to understand what are the aspirations of NATO members, Britain and France, and how we take it into account their strategic arsenals that are part of the alliance's combined strike potential. Putin emphasized that Russia is suspending its involvement in New START and not entirely withdrawing from the pact yet. The New START treaty, signed in 2010 by U.S. President Barack Obama and Russian President Dmitry Medvedev, limits each country to no more than 1,550 deployed nuclear warheads and 700 deployed missiles and bombers. The agreement envisages sweeping on-site inspections to verify compliance. Just days before the treaty was due to expire in February 2021, Russia and the U.S. agreed to extend it for another 5 years. And then, of course, we had a year later, the war broke out. Russia and the U.S. have suspended mutual inspections under New START since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. But Moscow last fall refused to allow their resumption, raising uncertainty about the pact's future. Blah, blah, blah. You get the point on all this stuff. I don't think we need to get into the nitty gritty of whether or not we're going to inspect each other's nuclear bombs. The question is, are they going to use them? The New York Post reported January 19th, 2023. Russia threatens nuclear war if it loses in Ukraine. Okay, well, there you go. A Kremlin insider warned Thursday that Russia could start a nuclear war if it lost its conventional war in Ukraine. Dmitry Medvedev, deputy head of Russia's Security Council and a close ally of President Vladimir Putin, made the threat in a post on the Telegram messaging app. Quote, "The loss by a nuclear power in a conventional war can provoke the outbreak of a nuclear war," Medvedev wrote in a post criticizing Western powers ahead of a Friday meeting in Germany to discuss further military support for Ukraine. Dozens of Ukraine's allies are set to meet Friday at the Ramstein Air Base in Germany to discuss the next round of military aid to Ukraine ahead of an expected increase in fighting in the spring. Yep, when things start warming up, and they already are, we're going to see maximum conflict. And then I wonder how much more Russia is willing to withstand on its own border before it moves to nuclear artillery. That's what I think first, nuclear artillery. Small yield, but large, powerful bombs to start peppering and wiping out military outposts, known positions, buildings of strategic importance. Maybe there's an old parking garage. They'll blow it up. And when that happens, how will the West respond? I doubt the West would immediately respond with nuclear weapons. This move would be an act of desperation by Vladimir Putin. Not complete failure, but we have been pushed to the point where we would now rely, they would probably say. If this happens, the U.S. may try to make some justified statement about the expansion of war or a full-on Western declaration of war against Russia. And what does China do? Does China just sit back? Well, we saw this story the other day. Zelensky warns of World War III if China allies with Russia. Perhaps. I believe what is more likely to happen is something more akin to what we saw in World War II. China will take the opportunity to align with Russia, supplies being exchanged and resources to strengthen their military powers on both ends. But China will be more concerned with taking Taiwan and other territories in Southeast Asia. They'll likely not be engaging in combat in Ukraine or in Europe. It will be a split theater, Europe and the Pacific, not too dissimilar to World War II. And then what happens? Does this trigger all of the alliances of several other nations? Do we then find ourselves in World War III? I've been increasingly finding it more difficult to wake up and tell you what we have been talking about for several years. It seems the stories just drone on and on and on, with one more sand being added to the heap. I suppose keeping up with the news is the most important thing, which is why it's probably important that you do watch videos like this, and I do keep reading the news and sharing them. But as the news reaches this level of escalation, as the conflict reaches this level of escalation, I find myself wanting to prioritize other things. Animals, getting our HQ set up in West Virginia, becoming self-sufficient, more self-sufficient than we already are, And we're not the most. It's not like we're a farm or anything. But as I see things like this, the question is, what's the most important thing to be doing right now? Whinging on the internet? Maybe not so much. Maybe it's a means to an end for us. It's something people find valuable and are willing to support. So we'll keep doing it. I suppose the important issue is that if we can keep informing people about the real threats that are approaching the United States, maybe we can divert it. But at the same time, a larger portion of my mental focus is thinking of things like, do we have weapons to defend ourselves in the event of some kind of collapse? Do we how much food do we have? Where do we go? Do we stay here? If war breaks out, we are relatively close to Washington, D.C. The largest capable bombs, the largest bombs that Russia has and other nations, would not reach us, but it would wipe out most of the farmland in the surrounding areas. So then what? Panic would erupt. Bridges would be collapsed or too dangerous to use. Food supplies would have trouble getting in. Do we move further inland? Are our investments in this area a bad idea? It's kind of funny. The reason we chose to set up in this area near Harper's Ferry is that it's far enough away, but close enough. You know, I was looking at Montana. No joke. Doing, but you know, Montana is, I got to be honest, it's all rich people, unfortunately. I don't know if you'll watch Yellowstone, but you'll probably get it if you do. It's fiction, but it's kind of based off this idea that Montana is a resort location to get away from everything for these rich people who are building houses and homesteads in this area because they're planning for something. Maybe just vacations, but maybe getting away from hot urban centers. We looked at Maine. Excuse me. I looked at upstate New York. Decided on West Virginia because it's MAGA country. Good opportunity, good people. And depending on where you are, it can be about an hour and a half drive to D.C. to the major airport. So not so bad. If we set up in New York City, no matter where you are in New York City, you're basically an hour away from the airport anyway, even if you're only a few miles out. We're a bit more than a few miles, but it's still about an hour drive because it's country road. And that was the point of getting away from the cities because of the urban crises we saw with Black Lives Matter and the Summer of Love. But now we're being faced with the prospect of nuclear war. That being said, I think D.C. is probably one of the safer places. I don't think it's the safest. We've got, Raven Rock and Mount Weather nearby. Those are the safe places. But I also think that D.C.'s probably got surface-to-air missile sites, and I bet it's got anti-nuclear capabilities, anti-ICBM capabilities. If there's one place you want to fortify and protect, it's probably the D.C. area. Now, probably, though, what they're more relying on is deep underground bunkers, like I mentioned, Mount Weather and Raven Rock, and they've been doing massive expansion on these facilities. If you're not familiar, these are the emergency bunkers for the seats of government. You've got one for Congress and one for the executive branch, and there's probably much, much more we don't know about. Recently, the U.S. has allotted more money to expand these facilities. And it makes you wonder, at a time when Joe Biden surprises Ukraine with a visit and $500 million, add more to the big old heap of the $100 billion we've been dumping into Ukraine, meanwhile abandoning the American people, do you think the U.S. government cares if Vladimir Putin drops a bomb on your small town? I think the answer is no. I think the U.S. is looking at it like this. We have to maintain the petrodollar. We have to control the energy economy of the world. And if we lose that, it won't matter if we have a country because we don't make anything. This has been the liberal world order. The U.S. has imposed environmental restrictions. Why aren't we working in Alaska? Restrictions. Playgrounds for the wealthy elites. Then they raised taxes, forcing companies to go to China. That was all on purpose. Now that China makes all our goods, if we were to go to war, we're doomed. And maybe that was all on purpose. Creating business relationships that make it so that neither side can go to war. I've heard the argument before, more trade means less war, and it is true. But it doesn't guarantee no war. It just simply means that when war happens, it will be substantially more devastating. Thucydides' trap is a real thing. That when a rising economic power is at the point of displacing the dominant power, there is a tendency for war to break out. And we're there with China. China now waving its finger at the U.S. saying, you have no power. They've expanded to the point where they're not scared. And if we go to war with them, they cut off our supplies. And we don't make anything here. So we're trying to. We've got chip manufacturing plants, silicon chips, computer chips. We're trying to get that back, but it's probably too late. It was a stupid idea. You want to maintain U.S. power and dominance? You certainly don't give away your ability to sustain yourself, because now we are nothing more than a hollow shell. Russia knows it. China knows it. And it seems like we are inching towards World War III. I hope not. I hope this is just blathering in the media. But there is an actual war on the border of Russia, in the Donbass region in Ukraine. The U.S. and European countries decided to get involved in a territorial dispute between Russia and a border country that isn't part of NATO, that isn't an ally. Why is Joe Biden flying to Ukraine and ignoring the people of East Palestine? Because he doesn't work for you. He works for somebody else. He doesn't care if you don't have water. He doesn't care if you're suffering. This is going to lead to war. And you know what? If they don't care about your water, what makes you think they care if a bomb falls on your house? I doubt they do. What they more care about is making sure the infrastructure of their war machine persists. And East Palestine does not factor in. Now, maybe you vote them out. But they don't seem to care all that much about that. Probably because of ballot harvesting. We're headed for dark times, and I got to be honest, we're in them. I hope things work out for the best. But chance favors the prepared. So sit back, watch it all happen, or start getting ready for something bad. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.